Who were the first civilizations to set foot on our planet? Not the names you've memorized from history class, but the real first ones. Our history is not a neutral record of events. It is a story told by the winners, carefully shaped by their power and influence over centuries. Every chapter we know has been filtered through the lens of those who prevailed, while inconvenient truths were quietly erased or reshaped. And yet, at a certain point in time, something extraordinary happened. Humanity made a leap. We shifted from primitive hunters, surviving from day to day, to builders of vast cities, architects of monumental stoneworks, keepers of complex calendars, and creators of intricate ancient writings. It was a transformation so sudden and so profound that it defies the slow, steady march of human development we are told to believe in. From crude stone tools to perfectly cut megaliths, from wandering tribes to cultures that mapped the heavens with precision. This change marked a turning point in human history. Over the ages, this knowledge evolved and carried forward into the present. We are the descendants of those relatively intelligent beings, inheriting both their achievements and their mysteries. But what if this transformation is not as simple as it seems? What if the story we've been given is incomplete? Or worse, deliberately misleading? What if the accounts left to us by ancient civilizations, the tales of gods descending from the skies, angels walking among mortals, giants who ruled the land, and disasters that reshaped the earth, were not myths, but literal memories passed down across generations? What if, in our distant past, we received knowledge so advanced it was beyond human understanding, a gift, or perhaps a burden, from sources we have yet to identify? If we piece together certain details, a very different version of human history emerges. One that overturns conventional knowledge entirely, contradicting much of what we've been taught. This version has been deliberately censored, buried, and in many cases ignored. Until now. Welcome to a new episode of Secret Origins. In the early months of 1946, the desert wind swept over the rugged hills of what is now the West Bank. Near the ruins of the ancient settlement of Qumran, a group of teenage shepherds wandered with their sheep and goats, the animals moving slowly over the uneven, sun-baked ground. Bored and restless, the boys began throwing stones into the openings of nearby caves, a harmless game to pass the time. One stone asked through the air and vanished into the darkness of a cave, and then came a sound that froze them in place. It was not the dull thud of rock hitting stone. It was sharp, hollow, and then the brittle, unmistakable shatter of pottery breaking. Cautiously, curiosity driving them forward, the boys stepped into the shadowed cave. The cool, stale air pressed against their skin as their eyes adjusted to the gloom. There, looming in the dim light, were large clay jars, ancient, solemn, and sealed for centuries. Inside the jars lay scrolls, fragile, cracked, yet miraculously preserved after thousands of years. In that moment, the boys had no way of knowing they had just uncovered one of the most significant archaeological finds of the modern era. Over the next months, archaeologists, historians, and even treasure hunters descended upon the region. They scoured the cliffs and caves, uncovering more fragments of ancient scrolls from 10 separate caves. Nearly 900 manuscripts in all. These would come to be known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. But among this vast trove was something far stranger. Fragments of a mysterious religious text, absent from the official Bible and long forgotten by human civilization, or so we thought. Today we know it as the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch, in its complete form, consists of 5 separate works: the Book of Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dream Visions, and the Epistle of Enoch. Together, these form about 100 chapters. They tell the story of Enoch, the 7th patriarch from Adam, father of Methuselah, grandfather of Noah. Yes, the same Noah known for the ark and the flood. But this is not the biblical story you've heard. The Book of Enoch presents a radically different version of the events that led to the Great Flood. It tells of the Watchers, described in biblical terms as fallen angels, sent to earth at some unspecified point in the distant past to observe humankind. Their mission was to watch, not interfere. According to one of the earliest legends about Enoch, he was the founder of astronomy, responsible for compiling the solar calendar, and the first to map the heavens in detail. The B'nai Elohim, or Sons of God, are said to have numbered in the hundreds. They descended to earth at Mount Hermon, a sacred mountain for both the Canaanites and later the Jews who conquered their land. In later centuries, temples to Baal, Zeus, Helios, Pan, and the goddess Astarte would be built upon its slopes. The term watcher meant more than simply observer. It implied vigilance, sleeplessness, and an unbroken gaze upon humanity, a special connection between these beings and mankind that had existed since ancient times. But over time, the watchers strayed from their role. They began to desire human women, taking them as wives, and in doing so, they broke the one law they were sworn to uphold. From these unions came hybrids, beings both human and something other. The Book of Enoch calls them Nephilim, giants of immense size and strength, violent and predatory, who plundered the earth and threatened all life upon it. These were no mere tall men. They were supernatural, man-eating giants, feared by all. The world had changed. What began as a quiet mission of observation had turned into something far darker. The Watchers, once regarded as vigilant guardians, the sleepless eyes of the heavens, had crossed a boundary that was never meant to be crossed. Their vows, sworn in the presence of the Highest, were shattered. They had descended from their place above and walked openly among humanity. At first, their presence was a gift. They guided mankind in the ways of knowledge, taught them how to till the soil more efficiently, how to mark the seasons by the movement of the stars, how to craft tools and ornaments of metal. But that guidance twisted into something else. The Watchers began to desire what they were never meant to touch: the daughters of men. They took them as wives, one after another, abandoning their charge of watchfulness. This union, forbidden from the dawn of their creation, bore fruit of a kind the earth had never known. The Nephilim. They were not merely large men. They were giants in both stature and appetite, creatures with the power and hunger of the divine, but none of its restraint. They consumed without limit, devouring livestock, stripping the land bare, and when that was not enough, they turned on humanity itself. The ground was soaked with blood, and the cries of the innocent rose like smoke toward the heavens. Corruption had spread across the face of the earth, not just in the violence of the Nephilim, but in the hearts of men who began to worship the power they saw in these hybrids, forgetting the laws of the Creator. The heavens could no longer remain silent. In the courts of the Most High, a council was called. The mighty gods, as the ancient text names them, stood in judgment. These were the great princes of the heavenly realms, beings older than the world itself, their will like iron, their word unbreakable. The charges against the Watchers were read aloud: violation of their sacred trust, defilement of the human bloodline, the spreading of forbidden knowledge, and the creation of chaos on the earth. There was no defense they could give. Their crimes were written across the land itself, in the ruined fields and burning villages, in the bones picked clean under the sun. The verdict was unanimous: they would be removed from the earth forever. The sentence was not execution. That would have been mercy. The sentence was imprisonment. The texts speak of a place deep beneath the earth's surface, in the bowels of creation itself, an abyss where light has never entered. It was here the Watchers would be taken, each bound in chains, crafted not by human hands, but forged in the fires of the heavenly realm, unbreakable even by their immense strength. This was no ordinary darkness. It was the kind of darkness that has weight, pressing against the skin, swallowing sound, seeping into thought. The air would burn with the heat of the earth's inner fires, yet offer no comfort, no release. Imagine their descent, once radiant beings, clothed in light, now dragged through chasms where jagged stone tears at their forms. The echo of their fall would have been heard only by the walls of the abyss. No mortal ear could have borne it. The chains snapped closed around their wrists and ankles, each link heavier than the heaviest mountain stone. They were fastened to the very foundations of the pit, unable to move more than a breath's length in any direction. Above them, the world they had corrupted would be cleansed. Around them, nothing but silence and the glow of eternal fire. The punishment was not only physical, it was the stripping away of all they had once been. No longer watchers, no longer the sleepless eyes of the heavens. They had become prisoners in the truest sense, cut off from the light, from their purpose, from the very sky they were meant to guard. They could not die. That would have been an end. Instead, they were left to endure the slow erosion of time, each passing century a reminder of their rebellion. They could remember the moment they chose to descend, to forsake their charge, to follow desire instead of duty, and they could remember the moment they realized that choice had doomed them. The earth would forget their faces, but not their shadow. The myths of giants and fallen beings, the warnings in sacred texts, the ruins that seem older than history. These would be their legacy, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the day their story would be told again. And somewhere, far above the choking air of their prison, the first signs of judgment upon the earth were beginning. The floodwaters were being prepared. But before they rose, another figure would step into the story, one who would speak on behalf of the imprisoned and carry the messages of both heaven and earth. That figure was Enoch. The judgment of the Watchers had been pronounced. The abyss had claimed them, their chains sealed, their light extinguished. But in the silence that followed, their voices still reached upward. Bound in the crushing darkness, they cried out, not in rage now, but in desperation. Their pride had been stripped away with their freedom, leaving only the raw edge of regret. They begged for an audience, for a chance to speak, for the smallest possibility that their punishment might be eased. And it was here that Enoch entered the story. In the traditions preserved in the Book of Enoch, he is not simply a patriarch, not merely a holy man among men. He is chosen as a bridge, a rare and dangerous position, to move between heaven and the depths where the Watchers lay imprisoned. Imagine the weight of that task, to stand between the unflinching justice of the divine and the pleading voices of beings who had once been magnificent beyond mortal comprehension, to walk into the presence of those whose very names could unsettle the foundations of the world. Enoch is not described as trembling or resisting his role, but the gravity of it can be felt between the lines of the text. He was stepping into a realm no human had walked before, not in dreams, not in visions, but in the appointed duty of a messenger. The Book of Enoch speaks of his journeys in language that blurs the line between the physical and the visionary. He moves between worlds, carried by forces he cannot fully describe, led by angels of higher rank whose presence radiates authority. One moment, he is on the earth, standing beneath the open sky. The next, he is drawn into a place where the air hums with unseen energy, where the light has no single source, and where the horizon bends in ways the human mind cannot easily accept. And from there, he descends, down through layers of reality, into the prison where the Watchers are held. The air changes first. The brightness of the upper realms fades into a heavy twilight, and the sound of his own breathing seems loud in his ears. The walls here are not carved by human hands. They are ancient, rough, and immense, as if the earth itself closed around these captives like a fist. He sees them, the Watchers, beings who were once crowned in radiance, now sitting in silence, their forms diminished, yet still carrying the shadow of their former majesty. Their eyes, once sharp and all-seeing, are dulled, but not extinguished. They speak to him, not with the command of kings, but with the urgency of the condemned. They plead for him to intercede, to carry their words upward, to speak to the Most High on their behalf. Their voices echo in the pit, overlapping in a chorus of desperation. Some beg for release, others for mercy, others simply to be heard, and Enoch, mortal though he is, listens. When he returns to the heavenly court, the contrast is blinding. From the oppressive dark of the abyss to a light so pure it seems to pierce the soul. Enoch delivers their words exactly as they were given, but the answer is unyielding. The Watchers' fate will not change. Their actions have altered the world too deeply to be undone. Their children, the Nephilim, have brought such ruin that only a cleansing flood can restore balance. And their knowledge, once meant as a gift, has become a weapon in human hands. The decree stands. The chains will not be broken. The prison will remain sealed. Enoch carries this answer back down, through the layers of heaven and earth, to the pit. There is no joy in the Watcher's eyes when he speaks. Some turn away in silence, their faces hardening into masks of resignation. Others cry out again, their voices roar, knowing now that no plea can reach high enough to move the judgment against them. Enoch leaves them there, his task complete. But the memory of that descent, of those chained figures and their hollowed voices, will follow him for the rest of his days. And beyond his role as messenger, Enoch's journey is far from over. For the same divine will that sent him into the depths will soon carry him to heights no mortal has seen, to witness the great cleansing that is to come. The fate of the watchers was sealed, their chains held fast in the depths, their cries swallowed by a darkness older than the mountains. But above the abyss, the earth was still in chaos. The Nephilim, the monstrous children of the watchers and human women, walked the land with unchecked power. They were colossal in form, savage in instinct, and their appetite knew no boundaries. The ground shook beneath their steps, and wherever they roamed, the world bent to their will. The fields were stripped bare, herds were hunted to extinction, villages burned under their hands, and when there was nothing left to take, they turned on the people themselves. The world was drowning in violence long before the first drop of rain. In the courts of the Most High, the judgment extended beyond the watchers. The problem was no longer contained in the abyss, it was walking openly across the earth. Humanity, created to be the stewards of the world, had been corrupted to its core. The Nephilim had become predators, but mankind had become followers of their strength, kneeling before them as gods. The law of the heavens was clear, the earth itself needed renewal. Not a mere purging of a city or a region, but a cleansing so complete that even the memory of the Nephilim would be erased from the surface. The decision took form like a storm building on the horizon. It would be water. Not a wave, not a storm surge, but a flood. A deluge so vast it would cover valleys, swallow cities, and erase even the highest traces of human pride. The oceans would swell beyond their limits. Rivers would rise and merge into seas. The skies themselves would open, releasing torrents without pause. What the waters did not drown, the currents would carry away into the deep. The world as it was would cease to exist. Enoch was made witness to this decision. The visions given to him were unlike anything he had seen before, and he had seen the ends of the earth from above. He saw the first black clouds form over lands that had never known heavy rain. He saw the wind shift, cold and biting, carrying the scent of the deep waters long before they arrived. Animals moved strangely, some fleeing toward higher ground, others standing motionless, as if they understood a truth no man could hear. And then the heavens broke open. The first rains fell as whispers, soft, almost harmless. But they did not stop. Day became night under a curtain of water. Rivers tore from their banks, carving new paths through the land. Whole forests vanished beneath churning waves. From the mountains, great walls of water rushed down into the valleys, swallowing everything in their path. Villages disappeared in seconds, their fires extinguished without a trace. The cries of man and beast alike were lost in the roar of the flood. The Nephilim, whose size had once made them invincible, now found no refuge. Even their strength could not outmatch the relentless force of the waters. They fought the currents, but the waves pulled them under all the same, erasing them from the surface of the earth. The flood was not only destruction, it was reset. The land that emerged afterward would be changed forever. The ruins of the old world would be buried beneath silt and stone. The stories of the giants, the watchers, and the civilizations before would survive only as fragments, whispered myths, strange carvings, and sacred texts hidden away. And as the waters receded, life would begin again. But for those who knew the truth, for Enoch, for the angels who carried out the decree, the world that came after was not the same. It was quieter, yes, but it was also emptier. The great powers of the past were gone, and the survivors would live in a world that did not remember them, yet would always bear their shadow. The waters of the great flood receded, but the silence they left behind was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of absence. A world emptied of voices that once thundered over the plains, of feet that once shook the very earth. And yet, the memory of those voices, those footsteps, refused to vanish entirely.